our true self, child of God. Jesus says, true self is the highest value in life. What will a man gain by winning the whole world at the cost of his true self? The true self that we've been talking about, that we realize as we detach from the identification with our ego, true self that Jesus says is the highest value in life. That true self is a child of God. And in this true self that we are more truly child of God than we are even a child of our parents. We have a higher reality, or a more essential reality, as a child of God. That being our fundamental relationship, into which all our other relationships are rooted. As a child of our parents, we have a psychological and physical identity, and that has clearly a certain reality. But the most basic reality is that reality we have as a child of God, and realizing that, finding that true self, is the work of contemplation. Contemplative experience doesn't rely really upon something abstract, but it's something practical and real and ordinary, in the best sense of the word, ordinary, something normal. In the New Testament teaching of Jesus in particular, the kingdom experience seems to be what we mean by the contemplative experience. And when Jesus talks about the kingdom, he talks about childlikeness. Unless you become like a little child, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. And it's this childlike quality that makes it possible for us to enter and live in, continually, the contemplative dimension of our faith. The most basic reality is that reality we have as a child of God, and realizing that, finding that true self, is the work of contemplation. This child of God that we are is called to be a fully mature child. Karl Rahner has a marvelous essay somewhere on this quality of childlikeness. And he says that the quality of a child, childness, he says, is openness. And the quality of an adult child, a fully mature child, is unbounded openness. Very wonderful description of sanctity, perhaps, unbounded openness. It's a definition or an understanding of holiness, of wholeness, that allows many different types of holiness, many different ways of entering this contemplative experience. We cannot be whole unless we are the unique person that we are. Following a discipline doesn't mean crushing our individuality or becoming something that we are not. But to be an adult child, to be our true self, is to be unboundedly open to the unique person that God has created us to be, and that conditions have formed us to be, with our wounds and handicap. And so Rahner says, God will be found by anyone who has the courage to keep up his childhood, courage to remain open to this essential identity that we are. And he says this, a human person is a child embarking on the wondrous adventure of remaining a child forever, or rather becoming ever more fully a child. His maturity and his divinization are just ever fuller actuations of his childliness. So even our divinization is simply the full development of our essential identity as a child of God. We can see the relationship between contemplative experience and contemplative being and childlikeness in a child. Children are natural contemplative in some way, not fully conscious, but because of their relative lack of self-consciousness, they are able to enter fully into what we call the contemplative dimension. The less self-conscious we are, the more contemplative we are, and the more ordinary and open we are as well. It's a very wonderful thing to pray with children. We have many small groups of children, meditation groups, usually started by parents who've been meditating for some time, and feel a natural sense of wanting to introduce their children as early as possible to this dimension of prayer. And it's a very wonderful thing to see that, and to see how naturally, how ordinarily a child can sit in stillness and in silence and do this inner work that Cassian described, the work of saying the mantra. The child doesn't necessarily find it easy, but they find it natural. And the wonderful quality of a child, of course, they don't ask lots of questions about, is this infused recollection, grace, or prayer of simplicity, or, they don't ask all these theological or psychological questions. They do the work. They are simple. It has, I think, a very wonderful formative effect upon their faith. They have this natural capacity for pure prayer, for experience of God, kingdom. This capacity tends to be either lost or overshadowed as they get older. It seems that certainly part of their religious formation should be exposure to this. And as we do the work, part of our knowing always calls this pure prayer the work. As we do this work, and as our true self is realized more clearly, certain changes appropriate to that of a child, an adult child, begin to appear within us. Some of the qualities of a child, innocence, for example. We associate innocence with childlikeness. And for an adult, this innocence of the child would be, for example, purity of motive, that we do things for simpler and simpler reasons, that we come to a singleness of mind about what we do. We do it attentively. We do it without duplicity, without ulterior motives. We do it with simplicity. Generosity is the characteristic of a child, at least sometimes. And as a child of God, as an adult child, this generosity is expressed, I think, in the way we give ourselves, the way we surrender, the way we abandon ourselves, if you like, the way we can commit ourselves. All of those are expressions of this generosity of a child. The ability to respond to the call of the gospel, to let go of everything. Poverty of spirit in the inner life depends upon this quality of generosity. And we believe that if we give everything, we leave everything behind, we will receive it back hundredfold. But the problem is, believing that often makes us prepared to give it all up, provided we get it back a hundredfold. We lay down a condition. We say, I'll give all this up, provided I get this back. That is a lack of generosity. And coming to that generosity is the work of grace. It's the work of simplification. A child also is characterized by courage, a lack of fear, at least in a healthy child. Usually the courage of a child is so great, parents have to look after it, to protect it. But it's the courage too that comes to us as a child of God, as we realize our true self. Courage to risk our life, to lay down our life, to let go of our familiar identity. There's a wonderful phrase in Heraclitus and the early Greek philosophers. If we can stop thinking about our troubles, it will generate courage. Taking the attention off our problem, troubles and worries, moving beyond the egocentric state generates courage. And there, I suppose, is the teaching of Jesus, when he tells us so often in the Gospels, particularly in the resurrection appearances, not to fear. In the Sermon on the Mount, not to worry. Neither worry nor fear. These aren't just consoling remarks. These are injunctions to us. Not to worry, to move beyond fear and worry, which we do in our prayer. Finally, the quality of truth, truthfulness. A child naturally tells the truth. A child loses its innocence, or its innocence is compromised when it encounters for the first time the dishonesty of adults. And we recover that truthfulness through our prayer, within the contemplative life, because we lose our fear. Our fears gradually decrease. Fear of being known, the fear of being vulnerable. We hide the truth because we are frightened. We fear revealing our false identity. But if we knew that our false identity is false, if we know that our ego is not our true self, then we don't mind letting the ego be seen a little bit. We don't feel we have to cover up to appear better than we are. And that's humility. Truthfulness is simply humility or self-knowledge. Allowing ourselves to be seen, to know ourselves as we really are. So those are, some of the practical changes which would be observable at a psychological and at a social level as a result of this work of pure prayer.